Civilizing America, a user's guide from the ground up. Chapter 8, Contact Others Steadily. Time communicating face to face changes society. We have focused so far on changes in you that can help you change others. You express your commitment to the values and solutions noted here by offering them to other activists, opponents, and voters. Your main tool for that task is face-to-face conversation. It is like going to a foreign country with the right franc or ruble in our pocket. Two people exchanging ideas is our most motivating influence readily available. Votes determine elections, ideas determine votes, and conversations deliver ideas. If you are hesitant about doing that, you have much company. Our social habit is to leave people as they are. We fill our mind with our own concerns throughout our day. Safe within our silence, we value the privacy of our thoughts and presume that others do the same. So, should we not just leave them alone? The reason for coming out of our shell is that features of our society are under threat. Imagine being invited on a cruise on a medium-sized boat, and during the trip you go below to find someone with an electric drill cutting a hole in the hull below the waterline. You would not say, well, everyone to their own thing. You would stop them and call for help. Our civilization is our boat. Hoping for safe passage on it, we instead find its structure attacked, and we are invited to intervene. Because face-to-face communication is an effort, we might prefer to rely instead on technology, since it is so easy to use. But its impact can be superficial. If you have something significant to share with a friend, you do it face to face, if you can. Personal contact affects our happiness most and ripples outward in phases. If we treat another person happily and kindly, they are more likely to do the same to someone else, and that person to someone else. Few influences generate more happiness than being with happy people. Or think of your own contacts at a distance. If you wanted an acquaintance to do something difficult for you, would you expect to convince them by texting them, sending an email, writing a letter, or meeting them? Or imagine training them in a skill. Would you do it via Facebook, Twitter, phone call, or in person? The fact is that any team seeking excellence of any kind develops skills as a unit. Activity together increases motivation. And once together, we affect each other beyond words. Touching another forms a more detailed image of them in our mind so that when we meet another's eyes, say their names, and shake their hand, we become more alive in them. Worried about what to say, canvassers multiply the impact of their words 5 to 10 times with their nonverbal cues, like facial expression, eye contact, body position, gestures, stance, closeness, tone of voice, and vocabulary. In a sense, word-bound meaning pauses microseconds while people size up nonverbal cues for trustworthiness and intentions. Nonverbal cues can help us redirect a conversation. When, for instance, someone launches into their standard speech and we would like to insert a point, we can move in front of them within 1.5 feet and match their eye level. This alerts them to something coming and diverts their train of thought. We say our sentence in a quiet voice and follow up as needed. Arguing instead at a physical distance or facing away from them, we are less likely to connect. Opening conversation. To gain confidence communicating, we can start just with saying hello and good morning. Across the world, a smile is the most reassuring signal we can offer. When appropriate, we can comment on others' dog, child, skill, or activity and open small talk. Reflections even on the weather tell us whether they will communicate with us, like us, and consider our ideas. We can draw on surroundings like sporting events, travel situations, features of our location, entertainment, and shopping venues. Are these avocados ripe? Or have you ever used this for? Or in a bookstore, this book has a good description of. Or I like this author. On a bus. It's a relief not to fight traffic. Once a new neighbor and I started off by talking about the brand of shoes we were wearing. People's T-shirt may display words and symbols meant to draw attention, so we can ask about it. Or notice an object they have. Could you tell me about that? Where did it come from? People walking a dog may be open. On my morning stroll, I sometimes encounter a lady and her friendly dog. And now the dog wags its tail, seeing me approach far off. Once accustomed to opening contact, we can share more ideas, shift from neighborly concerns to community conditions, and eventually to major issues. We are each a node of influence, and no one else determines its range. Our intent should fit the situation. People universally accept asking directions, for instance, or for help with a problem, like changing a tire, cleaning up a mess, or treating an injury. We can ask permission, excuse me, and then explain our request. Most people are self-conscious about initiating conversation and welcome us taking the lead. Connecting within a mutual experience, we bypass whether the other is bigoted, racist, or feels entitled, threatened, or resentful. Public settings like crowds in sports bars in Boston and New York watching their baseball teams face off imply equality and acceptance, and connections arise easily. An open group encourages exchanges. Whatever our situation, we can ask, "What do you think?" We discover others' viewpoint, admit we do not fully understand, and invite further clarification. Our inner critic may tell us we are not doing it right, though people typically accept us better than we do ourselves. We need only open conversation and help the other feel comfortable. When they speak, we look at them, but not rigidly, nod when appropriate, and when we can, offer a compliment. Since many are uncomfortable receiving one, asking a follow-up question helps relax them. Have you practiced that a long time? How did you learn that? We can skirt challenging material respectfully. We may see that differently, we note, while signaling non-verbally, but you and I can relate to each other anyway. Noticing others nearby, we can invite them closer, welcome their contribution, and alternate listening with talking ourselves. In a conversational setting, people can become uncomfortable when exchange is too unbalanced in either direction. We share our own ideas, do not take offense, and let nothing become a problem. Communication as sales. Donald H. Pink has reframed our idea of sales to mean how we enable people to change their thinking, and identifies 6 key activities: attunement, buoyancy, clarity, pitching, improvising, and serving. We can apply his points to our effort. Attune. This factor adds to what we know about rapport. Google building rapport for helpful ideas. But beyond our face-to-face attunement, if we wish to reach someone demographically different, at least temporarily, we need to lay aside identity politics, racial, national, gender, or religious. Insisting on our identity as the subject of our exchange, we declare to the other, who I am is more important to me than who you are. That may fit the moment when others use our identity to treat us unfairly, and we may need to assert it to restore fairness. But for progress toward our goals, we usually connect with people as they are. We join their condition instead of insisting they accommodate to ours. We draw on our versatility over our identity, reach to them further than they can reach to us, and minimize separateness. We can understand this through a common social issue: who accommodates to whom. If you are important to me because of your vote, position, or influence, I acknowledge that by adapting to you, going to you in your home or business or social pursuits, or obtaining an appointment with you. I subordinate myself to your needs. The more committed person adapts to the less committed. As a parent with a child in diapers, you are more committed to a clean diaper than your child is, so you subordinate yourself to that task. We show the limitations of identity politics when we seek employment, respond to a supervisor, or join others meeting with the Pope. Lower status adapts to higher status as viewed in the situation, even though ontologically all have equal status. In canvassing, we show ourselves dedicated to others' needs. We seek them out, grasp how they view the world, and find common ground. We are drawn to people who lift us. Buoyancy. A Zen master was asked once, "What is it like being inside your mind?" He answered, "Just like everyone else, but 2 inches off the floor." We instinctively want to be around happy people and avoid the unhappy unless we are so down ourselves that we want company there. Buoyancy portends positive outcomes. Others like our offer better just because we are happy handing it to them. We want to be likable, upbeat, and clear about our ideas, and listen to others excellently. Next quality is clarity. We need to know what we are doing. Though we can explain our own ideas, the other person may be a mystery to us. So we search out what is important to them. To know the parts of our explanation relevant to them, we listen thoroughly and remain alert to how we may misunderstand. Common terms can have a dozen or more meanings, and listeners choose among them as they reconstruct another's message. An experiment illustrated the disparity between senders and receivers' perceptions. In pairs, one person tapped out the rhythm of a familiar song like Happy Birthday or Jingle Bells, and then estimated the likelihood that their partner would guess it correctly. It is no surprise that people's actual success at this was just 1 in 40 tries. The surprise is that those doing the tapping estimated 1 in 2 success, alerting us that others may not understand us as well as we expect them to. With these 3 factors, we connect with people. The next 3 concern our response. Pitching. Our pitch draws from what we learned by listening. We think about the needs of society affecting the individual and the ideas they might welcome. We paint and color in the picture we promote, perhaps with a 10-minute narrative about ideas that matter to them. A flyer can list points we want to discuss. The next point is improvising. After our pitch, the other may have questions, needs, and personal angles. We listen, consider points they raise, and know our subject well enough to respond. Hearing poorly grounded beliefs and superficial ideas they may have adopted we reply with sympathy and respect. From their choice of media, we might guess about beliefs they hold. Comprehensive knowledge about current issues enables us to improvise effectively. The sixth and last of Pink's points is serving. Accepting our idea, they begin a collaboration with us. We bring them follow-up information, explore other ideas for agreement, help them register and vote, and offer inclusion in our group. Goals for canvassing. To prepare for canvassing, we can find those in our group familiar with the issues and attitudes among the population we are likely to encounter, learn from them, and practice responding to the issues we can expect to hear. We get confident at entering rapport with people, listening to them, drawing them out, recognizing their receptivity, and identifying goals we can pursue with them. We most want to find others eager to join our effort. We incorporate them into our group, and if it is organized into teams, suggest one they can work with. A second cohort agrees with us, will vote with us in the next election, but does not want further involvement just now. We can ask them to reach out to one more person in the next several months and periodically check back to encourage them. Whenever leaving someone, our standing goal should be to arrange our next meeting. A third group is willing to change but is not yet active. These we assist through the sequence we have described above. They carry out small actions, delivering information, or participating in public activities. They learn to open small talk and exchange easy ideas. They meet with us and our group. They ask questions to connect with others and take interest in them. They find common ground with others in values and voting preferences. They participate in outreach efforts and demonstrations. Through personal study and small group discussion, they broaden their ideas. They convey ideas to others. They welcome others into the core group and incorporate them into its activities. They take responsibility for others' progress and development. When our efforts fall short of our objectives, we need to define success in a way that sustains our motivation, so that if we do not elect a candidate or obtain a policy change, we still reach mid-course checkpoints. Look for the learning in the experience. Enlarge our contacts. Show people how they deepen their skills. Value the principle demonstrated. Change attitudes. Make the vision more real to the public. Reaching the religious right. My mother's religion taught me that even to be a good person, one must be religious, that a non-religious society would inevitably be harmful. Worst case examples back then were the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. My father had a more skeptical view that also impressed me. Be practical. And in fact, watching how things turn out in real life has a spiritual lineage. By their fruits you shall know them. Matthew 7:16, which describes humans' tendency to express values in tangible form and enables us to think backward. The quality of the behavior reveals the validity of the thinking. While spirituality seems to me more and more to overlap with simple goodness, church-connected or not, both history and current events have demonstrated that religious affiliation does not ensure moral behavior. Americans might wish to apply this to Islam, since as a belief it appears not to prevent one person from killing another for ideological reasons. But Christians have a parallel record to account for. The impact of religion in general, however, is out of our reach. We cannot influence either Islam or Christianity, but only the person before us. Since people adopt a religion because they believe they benefit from it, we might ask them, do you feel your religion works for you? Is it a positive influence in your life? If they say no, or have no interest in religion, we turn to other issues. If they say yes, we can courteously open the subject. Though we might be anxious at first, even to listen to beliefs that could sound strange to us, many religious tenets are grounded in human nature, found across the human race, and referred to as moral foundation beliefs. Major ones appear to be care, harm, fairness, cheating, loyalty, betrayal, authority, subversion, sanctity, degradation, and liberty, oppression. Discussing them, we draw on both people's religious instruction and their deeper human instincts. An inclusive context is the role of ideas. Are ideas important to you? Have you received one from a parent or teacher or friend that made a difference in your life? If they look at us blankly, we can explain. Many people just imitate what others around them are doing, good or bad, and absorb their attitudes. They don't think much about one being better than another. Do you think that happened to you? Or did you think about what was best? We remind them of their power of choice, that they can adopt a superior idea even against their conditioning. We need not challenge their religion's teachings and may be religious ourselves. Our interest is how they apply their beliefs to society. We focus here on Christians because, despite their potential for goodness, some periodically organize to seek political control. Important to understand is that our nation's founders regarded religious differences as unresolvable. They had just emerged from generations of religious war and were certain that to respect human rights, a nation had to be secular, not governed by a religion. While many U.S. Christians accept this, other religions such as Islam, Judaism, Baha'i, Buddhism, and Hinduism seem at present at least to welcome America's free-for-all, where each applies its beliefs to its own people and leaves others alone. But a troubling oversight is people's failure to appreciate the ominous tendencies of theocracy, a religion with dominant political power. You might approach it this way. You've heard of the Spanish Inquisition, right? The church delivered to the state people who believed differently to be tortured or killed. The evidence is that over 10,000 died, with thousands of them burned alive. And later in the religious wars from the late 1500s to the early 1700s, Catholics and Protestants invaded, tortured, and murdered each other, and over 1 million died. You understand this, right? Religious leaders were certain they had the power of life and death over others' beliefs. Your person may not comprehend this, and lacking prior knowledge about it, may see you as their first reference for it. You continue. I understand this can be hard to grasp. It violates everything we think should be true about our religion, so we need to stretch our mind even to include it in our thinking. Notice how it feels to say to yourself, people in my religion tortured and killed others just for believing differently. What do you experience when you even think that? If they question the data we cite or the gravity of the treatment administered, suggest a joint search. The Internet has substantial information readily available, but it is critical to understand why this happened. We can surmise that it came from humans' innate drive for mastery over their environment, a primitive impulse that overwhelmed their understanding of spirituality. Asserting political control for religious motives violates spiritual principles. Spirituality and democracy both affirm the significance of the individual with internality, their common quality, the personal management of one's thoughts, values, and actions. In democracy, we can thoughtfully agree on our form of government. And in spirituality, we are each responsible in conscience for our relationship with God. Without internality, an essential quality of both spirituality and democracy disappears. A government demanding supposedly spiritual actions is anti-spiritual. Requiring early Christians to burn incense to Caesar split their consciousness, pitting behavior against principles. The adage, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, explains. While theocracy tends to suppress alternate religious expression, democracy directs citizens to come to agreement on how to behave in society. Requiring others to follow the rules of our religion denies them the right to their own spirituality and confuses their conscience. In general, we absorb the views of those we depend on, and unless we decide otherwise, social history is personal destiny. From family and peers, we learn minute by minute what warrants our attention. We understand how evangelical Christianity could defend racism, for example, due to its roots in southern states, where people prayed for slavery to survive. We tend to embrace what expresses our tribe's attitudes and avoid the distasteful. In discussing the next issues, we aim just to establish a threshold of awareness. People first need to grasp the form of an idea before they can reflect on their stance toward it. We do not try to convince them of our views, but invite them to think through their own, how they view human nature and explain the world. Each question is a starting point, so that exploring all could occupy many conversations. We are learners, curious and respectful when we do not understand, and become fascinated at how others construct their mind. Sample conversations. I would like to understand people on the religious right. We might begin. My own upbringing left me with unanswered questions, and Christians often seem confident of their views. As a body, you are certainly a force in the world today. Could I ask you about your faith? The person nods, sure, and we begin on comfortable ground. We do not need to assert a personal viewpoint, but only wonder. I've wondered why. Could you explain that to me? I can't quite put together X and Y. Were you raised in your religion, or did personal experience mark a change for you? They may describe a conversion, the influence of parents or teachers, or their own spiritual practices. We ask them to explain how their religion affects their life. So what is your occupation? How do your beliefs affect your work? How did your religious instruction influence your education? Were you homeschooled? From their schooling, we can extend to their views about learning and science. Is it important to connect learning to evidence? What does science mean to you? How do you decide which aspects depend on evidence and which on faith? Do they think that the fossil record extending back millions of years demonstrates evolution? The question is important because society operates on evidence. We can inquire, you believe God could create everything out of nothing, right? Is there some reason God could not change species by a process? The entire universe seems to work by processes, so why must God only create directly, but not through processes? I don't understand that. Are they aware that species constantly develop and go extinct? We do not ask them to change their mind, but only raise possibilities. We can explore social issues aligned with Christian teaching. Christians made an impact on the world from the start by emphasizing the value of the individual, which back then especially meant opposing slavery. Could Christians approve of some people oppressing others? For centuries, missionaries tried to lift the poorest people's lives by starting schools, hospitals, and universities, and serving people's needs. Do you find those values in your congregation? Christians historically have created great art and music. Do you think that would arise within Christianity because spirituality helps you appreciate beauty? Do people you know encourage art, music, and higher learning? If they do not, inquire why. The story of the Good Samaritan was about caring for complete strangers unselfishly, right? Does your group think that way? A couple centuries ago, even though evangelicals in the South largely shared the racial attitudes there, many in the North were active in the abolitionist movement against slavery and racism and helped remedy the worst conditions of poverty. Are you pleased that others in your church did that? We can inquire whether Jesus came to make his followers rich, or were they bidden instead to help those who were poor? Have you ever been evicted, desperate, and depending on others to survive? Were you ever treated unfairly or unjustly and had to seek help? If they did, or mention help they extended, apply that to social patterns. For people with no education, we don't expect neighbors to step in and educate them, do we? We open schools to help them, and hospitals for health, right? Is your congregation concerned how the system solves problems that affect people? Ask about efforts for the destitute, homeless, and unemployed. How social justice shows up in sermons or discussions, and appreciate what they report. You probably know the Bill of Rights forbids an establishment of religion, meaning governments supporting one church. Why do you think they did that? Find out what they know about the religious wars of history, the Inquisition, burning people alive, and the ghastly tortures across Europe as religions tried to impose their beliefs on others. When Jesus was hauled before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor wanted to check out Jesus' political aspirations, and Jesus explained, quote, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight that I not be handed over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not from this world." End quote. John 18:36. You can point out that Jesus explicitly gave up the use of political power. Today he would have said, "We are not seeking political control. We are not trying to rule over anyone." So, do they think they know something Jesus did not know? Even though the Constitution says not to, many evangelicals want Christianity as America's religion, with prayer and religious instruction in the schools, shared public facilities, Christian displays in government buildings, exempting it from some laws and imposing their beliefs on others. Do you think that's a good idea? Could there be downsides? Should religions get special subsidy and protection? If they say yes to the latter question, ask them, okay then, I understand. And you think we should provide the same to Jewish synagogues and Muslim mosques? We want to know what are good and evil, and who says what are good and evil. For society's limited purposes, democracy answers the first question by public debate and agreement, and our Constitution addresses the second with, it won't be an established religion. We can inquire, wouldn't you rather have a society that applied Christian principles because people agreed they were civilized and positive, even not knowing they were Christian, than explicitly Christian rules imposed by force? Because religions make their way through a physical and social world, they inevitably face accommodations that enable them to survive. This presents them with the challenge, however, of distinguishing beliefs that express a spiritual principle from beliefs that adapt to their current culture. Did your denomination ever require women to have their heads covered in church? Do they still do that? 1 Corinthians 11. Do you think that was a spiritual issue or a custom of the time? Some people have used St. Paul's advice, slaves, obey your masters, Ephesians 6:5 and Colossians 3:22, as proof that slavery was designed by God. Do you think so? Or were they just trying to make the best of the situation then? Proverbs 23:13 suggests that beating your child with a rod to correct them is okay because it won't kill them. Current research has made clear that even beating children, much less with a rod, increases violence overall. So it's probably not based on a spiritual principle. We can reasonably examine many features of religion on this basis. We can open issues of same-sex marriage and rights for LGBTQ individuals. You must know gay or lesbian individuals, since many have come out after years of hiding. Have you ever met one who chose it consciously as a lifestyle? Or were they sure they were born as they are? In the ways that matter to society, like being law-abiding and doing their job, did they seem to be the same sort of people as everyone else? Could we say that that places them at least on par with someone in a wheelchair from an auto accident? For people we regard as having a limiting condition, we say they are coping with a challenge, so let's at least help them live peacefully. Does it make sense that God and society would treat gays, lesbians, and the transgender with as much consideration? For to a straight person who presumes choice is involved in the gay Do you think you could choose to be gay? Or do you think you are born to be the way you are? Explore their perceptions of how hard it would be for them to adopt that lifestyle, to help them understand the difficulty of moving in the opposite direction. If they insist that choice exists, we can point out that they have solved the problem as it applies to themselves. They choose not to be gay or lesbian, so why must they interfere with others' lives? Why make it hard for others to live? Years ago, when those coming out were attacked as a threat to marriage, Ralph Nader pointed out the threat to marriage is divorce. If society were determined to make marriages endure, it could outlaw divorce and leave gays and lesbians alone. Accepting people as they are is an enduring issue. People back then expected to hate their enemies, but Jesus made a point to correct that. A basic Christian teaching has always been to love our enemies. Jesus told them they should do that because that's what God does. Matthew 5:43 to 45. Do people in your congregation believe that way? How do they regard others who are different? Some Bible passages urge hospitality to those who are different. The Lord God tells the Israelites, quote, "When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." Leviticus 19:33 to 34. The Lord God apparently wanted people to imagine they themselves were the Jews walking across the desert toward Egypt. Can you imagine doing that? How would you have felt? Why would the Lord God have been so clear about accepting strangers? And not just accepting them, but even loving them. Unquote. Otherism is the basic bias, that anyone different in any way is a threat. But in Leviticus, the Lord God corrects that mistake, saying, there is a higher principle here. Don't be selfish. Treat people like they have the same identity as yourselves. The strangers today are immigrants bringing their own ethnicity, religion, and language, just like the Israelites did in Egypt. Quote, "In the past, evangelicals may have reacted like anyone to strangers, of course. Who are these people? But that's how America came to be. I don't understand how a religion could oppose immigration as a religious issue. Could you explain that to me? Other spiritual nature is the same as ours, and once they're here, you have the opportunity to convert them. So wouldn't you welcome just for that?" Did they ever stop to think that Jesus could not have been a tall, blonde, clean-shaven Nordic, but must have been short, bearded, and brown-skinned? They may hint at fears of being displaced, resentment at what they regard as unfair treatment, and suspicion of people they don't know, which suggests discussing how to make society fair. Is fairness among your religious beliefs? Do you think it matters spiritually whether some people make others suffer? We can pursue a similar tack about misogyny, white nationalism, patriarchy, criminal justice reform, love of neighbor, pollution, and economic inequality. If our questions prompt the other to object, "You're against my religion, aren't you?" we can answer, "Absolutely not. The exact opposite. There is so much good in your religion that I only want you to live by it. Nothing would please me more than for you and your congregation actually to follow Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Have you ever heard of it? It's in the Bible, chapters 5 to 7 in the book of Matthew. Could we look it up together? I'm concerned that human opinions have taken your people far away from what Jesus asked his followers to do." To someone insisting that Christianity is under attack, we can ask them to listen carefully to what people say. Maybe they just want you to stop trying to control others' lives and get special favors you don't grant to other religions, things Jesus told you not to do anyway. Someone put it this way: "If your Jesus is so great, why aren't you nicer?" That's a simple way of putting it, but isn't that what you are asked to do? We listen to their experiences, respect what we can, and explore how their personal viewpoint reflects the better angels of their religion. Addressing a new group. Invited to speak to an audience, we may first wish to deliver a comprehensive picture of national and world needs and the strategies to meet them. If our intent instead is to find a committed nucleus to work with, we can limit ourselves to what already matters to them and relate our presentation to their answers. First question: what changes in society do you want? We condense on a flip chart the issues they name. Those offering suggestions are most likely to respond to our presentation, though we may already know the problems that concern them most. Second question: how are you reaching those goals now? They have made clear what they want, so what are they doing to obtain it? Do they want better results from their time and effort? If not, we have no reason to proceed. But if they acknowledge that their progress is limited, they may be open to hearing alternatives. So I gather that you're not satisfied, and you want to improve your results. We want the question clear before we answer it. Can I explain the next step? Third question. We offer to fill the gap. That their group exists means it has probably completed the stages described in the first half dozen chapters above. For further progress, they need to solve the issue of numbers, how to motivate others, which we explain in chapters 7 to 15, weekly effort contacting others, developing new people's motivation and commitment, learning how to explain ideas and issues, thoughtful planning for assignments, increasing members' competence, and healing the community. In a setting arranged as a debate, our goal is with the audience and not our opponent. Words can tunnel endlessly through issues, so we first try to determine a common intent based on lasting values. and might begin with our nation's founding documents, where we and our opponents draw competing implications. We want the differences clear enough that listeners can distinguish between them. Concepts critical for our society, according to our founders, are union, justice, tranquility, defense, general welfare, liberty, equality, inalienable rights, and the pursuit of happiness. Once agreeing on common purposes, we can compare how we and our opponents would attain them.